Aperture is the very first thing that I go to whenever I'm taking photos somewhere. It's the #1 setting that affects how I shoot. 9 times out of 10, it's the thing that I'm affecting to get the shot that I like. And it's the very first entry in a new series called Getting Out of Auto. What the F? Or more precisely, what the F stop? That's the little number that is associated with aperture. A low number, f2, means the aperture is wide open, whereas f13, your aperture is going to be quite small. Your aperture is the small opening at the back of the lens, allowing light to hit your imaging sensor. Now, if you want to see this in action, you can always hold your camera up in selfie mode in video and set the aperture nice and small, and you'll see the aperture blades close in as you start to record. So that's what it is, but why is it important? Why does aperture matter to me? Because it can really affect your style of the shots that you're taking. A wide open aperture near f2, f4, in that sort of range, is going to give you a really shallow depth of field. That means in this space here, only a small slither is going to be pin sharp focus. The rest of it is going to be creamy smooth out of focus. That's where you get those little bokeh balls around Christmas lights and stuff, looking like little glowing orbs. The opposite is true with a small aperture. That means you've got f-stops of 11, 13, maybe 15. It means that the distance from the lens out to infinity, a lot more of that range is going to be in that pin sharp focus. There isn't going to be much smooth out of focus elements in your shots. Now, this can all be affected by focal length, but we're not going to go into that in this one. So great, blurry backgrounds, I want f2 or f4, whatever the lens will allow. And for landscapes, I want f13 because I want everything to be in focus, right? It's not quite that simple. There's going to be times when you're shooting a landscape that you want something out of focus. Maybe up close to your lens, like a little leaf just to frame things. Maybe then you want to use f4. This is the thing with aperture, and this is why it's more of a stylistic choice than nearly all of the other settings in manual mode. This is the one that you're going to achieve the look that you want to get. I quite often use f-stops that most people for landscapes would say is silly, because I'm shooting almost always wide open. That, for me, really helps get a nice glowy sky behind something in the foreground that's just pin sharp. Especially if you're on the beach, you want to pick out those waves really close into you, but you want the sky behind to be just a smooth orange sunset. Now, before you go and rush outside and shoot some shadows, before you stay inside in this lockdown version 3, maybe going outside and just going everything, changing the aperture between every shot isn't such a good idea. You see, there's another effect of aperture, and we kind of glossed over it at the start. It's how big the hole is, letting light hit your imaging sensor. Now, the wider the hole, the more light's going to come through, so your image is going to be brighter. The opposite is true if you're using f-stops of 11 and 13, where the aperture is going to be smaller. Your image is going to be quite a lot darker. Now, there's a few times I've used that to be able to cheat a long exposure somewhere when I didn't have the right ND filter. Why does that matter? Well, because we're only taking our first step of getting out of auto, we might not know how to change the other settings in what's called the exposure triangle, which is aperture, shutter speed and ISO, to compensate for the effect of us changing the aperture. Don't worry, because your camera's probably got a mode that'll help you out with this. It's called aperture priority mode. This mode is like having the stabilizers on. You get to pick the aperture that you want, and your camera uses its fancy gizmos and it sets the other values for you. So you can get the style that you want, exposed correctly without too much hassle, and you're learning about one of the settings right off the bat. So there's your homework. Set aperture priority as your mode for the next couple of days. Go and shoot some shutters and learn about the effect that it's having on your images as you change the aperture. Now, if you enjoyed this video and you want to stick around for the rest of the Getting Out of Auto series, next up, we've got something that's not part of the exposure triangle, because we're going to be talking about graphs. Yeah, how very mathematical. The next one, we'll be talking about the histogram and what that means and how the hell it's going to change our photos. But for now, my name's Andrew. I hope you're staying safe. Thanks for watching.